work for so long, and there's no denying that it has become tenfold more relevant in the past year. But I actually want to backtrack to 2018 and start with Champ, which is a 43-foot neon boxing glove uterus that you displayed on Sunset Boulevard. You came out punching, quite literally, making your artistic statement. Can you just tell us a little bit about creating that piece?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I just want to say thank you as well for everything and all these fine details. I've never given a talk where I've seen my feet around the campus and the city, and there's I just noticed in the entrance there's images of my work, and because my family and my best friends are in my work, that's my sister-in-law, that's my girlfriend. So this is really meaningful, and thank you for the intro and everything. Champ. Alright, so I was boxing. It ended up being a space that was really formative for me and really cathartic. I was kind of just starting to find my footing as a woman in the art world in this male-dominated space, and I was also working through a lot of stuff from my upbringing and to do with power and violence. I grew up in a really rough part of London that was very, very aggressive. And so, but then I was kind of drawn to aggressive energies, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can be a bad thing, but the boxing gym for me felt very familiar. And I was learning how to defend myself and take space away from other people. So boxing, I was obsessed. And I got home to my studio, and it was 8 years ago, during the election, the last time, the one that ended up with Donald Trump being president. And having lived in America for so long, I was really struck by how every election cycle we would have to sit and listen to and consume statements about rape, about being a woman, about abortion as a consequence of rape, and they were always being discussed by old white men. And it would enrage me, and as a Brit, and England's super flawed in its own ways, but as a Brit, we didn't have to talk about abortion. So I was angry as someone who has personal experience with these things, and I closed my eyes to meditate, and I had this image of the uterus and the ovaries are boxing gloves, and so I sketched it out on my studio wall, and I created it as a smaller neon work. It was supposed to become, there you go, that's champion. It was supposed to be less and less relevant. In fact, it was shown at a Jack Shaman gallery, a group show, and a writer wrote about it, saying that, that version of it, saying Zoe Buckman's piece is screaming, we're still fighting for our right, but she's an idiot because because Hillary Clinton's about to be president, haha. So, didn't turn out like that. And after Trump was elected, and this was obviously way before Roe v. Wade was overturned, our production fund got in touch with me and they said, do you want to make a huge public version of Champ? And I was like, okay, am I going to have to make it myself? Because I don't know how to do that. So we fundraised and we put that out there on Sunset Boulevard. I'm going to be really, really honest. It's not my proudest work. Yeah. And for a while, it was I was uterus girl. Before that, I was lingerie girl. Now, anyway. I feel for me, I made it, and then I just kind of wanted to move on from it, but it's still turning on Sunset Boulevard, and I'm glad that it's there, and the people who need to feel seen and advocated for feel that way. But I don't know, I just don't feel like it's my best work.
Well, moving on to some of your other works. Recently, as Ava also mentioned, the Whitney National Portrait Gallery have acquired some of your works, and these institutions, as much as we can kind of laugh and try and make spaces for ourselves, they're incredibly important, and it's incredibly important that they honor and see artists like you. I was listening to a podcast, and you said, once you wake up, it's very hard to unsee things, and I think finally that time has come for these institutions. Could you talk a little bit about how meaningful it is to be recognized in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely, like, I have zero chill about it. I'm not like, oh, this is the Whitney, whatever. No, like, I was gagged, and I still am when I think about it. These museum acquisitions, for me, as a kid, again, growing up in, like, a rough neighborhood, not being someone that felt comfortable in museums, but also, like, we were taken as kids in school to the National Portrait Gallery, and they were like, sit and draw. So I sat on the floor in that museum, and so to have a work that has been collected by them and it's going to be on display early next year it's really, really awesome, and it's gratifying and validating. Then there's another level of it, which is that especially with the last two acquisitions, the Whitney and the National Portrait Gallery, they've actually acquired embroideries portraits, which is still quite a new thing for me. But that's another level, because then I'm like, my sister-in-law Dion, who is my best friend, and she, I've known her since I was 15. Her parents are both from Nigeria, and she's not in the art world at all. She didn't grow up in these environments, and now, like, she's represented in the Whitney. My girlfriend Kush Jumbo, who's this incredible actress, she's represented in the National Portrait Gallery. So there are these other layers of, like, we're here. I'm putting us here, and that feels good too.
I mean, that's such a beautiful statement you just said about representing other people through your art and actually allowing them to live in a space. And just like, your sister-in-law lives outside the Avon right now, what does it mean to you to be able to also give them a platform and to recognize these people around you through your own artistry?
Yeah, it's I feel really honoured, like this. So that's Kush Jumbo. I stepped way out of my comfort zone, and I created a piece of video art. It's a 17-minute performance of this long-form poem called "Show Me Your Bruises." Then, last minute, the third actress dropped out, and Sienna Miller. I don't know if anyone's heard of her, but she was
small actress.
She was like. I said to her, can you help me cast the third woman? And she was like, no, it's you. And I was like, nah, bitch. Nah. And she was like, Zoe, you can do this. If you hate it, you just cut yourself out and you reshoot it. But she made this point where she was like, it's your story, the poem is your story, but you're sharing the stage with me and Kush. And when I think about it, and to answer your question, like, that is a lot of what my practice is about. Like, all the work is autobiographical, and it all starts with something that I have a personal experience of. But then I expand it out because I want to listen to us and hear our stories and bring that into my work. So because it's not too me. Do you know what I mean?
I love that. Well, your work, as we can see, spans so many different mediums. I want to start with needleworking because I'm particularly struck by the fact that needleworking is kind of a domestic, womanly thing that has not been deemed, high art by the art world. And Judy Chicago has been a total pioneer in that. You have brilliantly followed and made it your own thing. But how have you kind of reclaimed this art, and how does it fit in your life? I mean, on the way here, you're like, I have this needleworking in my purse, where can I leave it? Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. The embroidery thing, it's interesting because I'm aware of the advantages that I have with embroidery because I'm completely in control. And I went to ICP, the International Centre of Photography, and even in school, like, I didn't feel comfortable with lens-based media. So I was etching text onto the glass of the photo frames, and I think I was trying to find a way of like bringing my actual hand into the work. Embroidery was something I started to use when I had a tiny baby and I just become a mother, and it was close and small, and it was something that I could put down and breastfeed and do all of that shit and then pick up again, you know. And so it served a purpose then, and then in using the embroidery I started to realise like something intuitively felt right. Like, I've always been a fan of Louise Bourgeois and Judy Chicago also, but something felt like I'm falling in line with something that is way before the art world and before we started to put value on art. And just for me, it just, I don't know, something in my gut was like, stay here. I then sort of started to work with neon and other materials, but then when my mum was terminally ill, I needed something that could come on a plane with me and that I could have by her bedside. So again, embroidery, textile, smaller, close work. Yeah.
And you just were speaking a little bit about your mom. I know she was such a matriarch and an anchor of your life and has come through so much of your work in such a beautiful way, and you pay homage to her in so many different ways. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the position she filled both when she was here and since she's passed in your work.
Absolutely. So, you know, my mum, she gifted me so much of who I am. Like, people say I've got chutzpah, I've got balls, and my mum had the biggest balls in the family.
Same.
Yeah, your mum's a baddie. But my mum was also like really silly and irreverent and fun and warm, and then so vulnerable as well. And there was a whole other side to her that really taught me a lot about mental health, about trauma within the home that she had experienced, and then of course generational trauma. And why was it like that in the home? Like, why was my grandfather the way that he was? Why was my grandmother the way that she was? And so I learned a lot about like Jewish history and what my ancestors, how hard they had to become, and the negative impact that had on our parents' generation. I'm talking like we're the same age, we're so not the same age.
We're pretty close.
Yeah, but my mum, so she gave me all of this stuff. She was an activist, right? And she just loved people. She would talk to everybody. And also, I got my Jewish identity completely through my mother. My dad is from Jewish stock, but you know, I identified as an atheist, and there was a whole name change situation, which I know is very common for us as well. And did they elect to change their name? Did they have to change their name? Was society such that they felt that to change their name was the only way to be safe, kind of thing? That's my dad's side, more Sephardic. My mum's side was Ashkenazi Jews, and my mum was like a Jew. When like even that word was like, ooh, you know, like look, I think we're reclaiming that now. But I got my identity from her, and so when she passed, I felt this huge void. You know, like the Jewish jokes and the stories and just all of, and the food and the Yiddish slang and like the warmth and the generosity, like all of these things I suddenly felt like I was without. And so that really sparked, I think, my desire to kind of engage with a Jewish community in New York, which has been growing and growing and growing, but I didn't have before. If that answers your question in any way.
No, that's great. And kind of going off of that, I love your Instagram bio where you declare yourself as artist, Hackney in Brooklyn, Jewish mother, and Jew. So there's a lot of difference there, and then there's a lot of intersectionalism. Could you talk a little bit about how all those identities, either play together or separate?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm very London and I'm very proudly London. But I'm also like East London though, East London, like it's very important to me. So I wanted to declare that and that I'm an artist. The bio used to say artist, Hackney in Brooklyn, intersectional feminist, Jew. Jew was added since the pandemic. And that was when I had my own kind of awakening of the problem of anti-Semitism around me. Intersectional feminist is how I identify, and I think is like, for me, the sort of leading way of life and what we should all, I think, aspire to. My experience in the past year has been that I feel like these movements that I identified with and contributed so much to, I feel that in many of those spaces I'm not welcome. And so that has made me go like, well then, they're not being intersectional. They're kind of ruining that word for me right now. I'm gonna keep it for myself on a personal level. I know what intersectionality is. I still try my very hardest to embody that, but I'm not putting that on my fucking bio. I'm not putting it on my bio. I added Jewish mother, and we didn't want to take it too somber, but it was very, very recently. I was really inspired by Hirsch's mother and her approach and the things that she was saying publicly, and I was like, oh my god, Jewish mother's so amazing. Oh my god, I'm a Jewish mother. I want to own that. So yeah, that's why.
You so brilliantly use activism both on a personal level through your Instagram and also through your art, and I know we have tons of students and student artists in the room. I was wondering what advice you might have for how to use our voices. We kind of need marching orders.
I think that you all know how, like, what you can do in this moment and how you can show up. Like, I believe that everyone already knows, whether that's, legal stuff, writing letters, being there for people, organising cultural events, hosting Shabbat, being loud and, like, public, being proudly Jewish, showing warmth, or even outside of the Jewish piece, like, whatever the cause is that you feel deeply about, I feel like we all know how we can affect change, but I think that there is also, we are in this moment where lots of people are not stepping into that, and because it's really hard, and it comes with a lot of like, it's inconvenient, and it's messy, and so I guess my marching order would be, so do, act. Everyone has to be doing something right now because things are very bad.
And you've stepped up in such a tough time, and you've been met with a lot of death threats and other really violent messages. How do you keep going, and why? I mean, it would be really easy for you to be like, okay, I'm going to delete my Instagram, sign off, and make art in my studio.
Yeah.
But you have become kind of more empowered than ever sharing your voice. How do you do that?
Well, I am what we call in England gobby, like I am mouthy, and I've always been that way about things that I feel deeply about, and I still feel deeply about these things. Like I've been advocating for body autonomy and abortion rights, and also really amplifying and attempting to bring into the conversation and remove the stigma around conversations to do with consent and sexual violence and intimate violence within relationships and all these things. So when I started to see this rise in anti-Semitic hate, why would I suddenly be quiet, right? If I'm already loud, and this one affects me just as the others have affected me, why would I be quiet? And I see that the hate is getting worse, so I feel like I need to keep on keeping on. Now, everyone who loves me, small group, but everyone who, cares for me has said to me, please stop, please go offline, Zoe, because I get death threats and I get rape threats. I also live alone as a woman. I'm not in like a doormat building or like one of those elevator situations. So I'm not safe. I don't feel safe most of the time. And so people are like, please babe, give it a rest. But the problem is that there really isn't that many other people who will take it on right now. So I'm like, if I stop speaking about anti-Semitism within the art world, no one else is really doing that. It's like on my level or above my level, no one's doing that. And so I do feel this sense of responsibility and like, oh, listen, show me one other person who's going to be amplifying this, and I'll just be like, thank you, and I'll sit down for a little bit. And then also in addition to that, like, I'm aware of what my ancestors and people today across the globe, how brave they were, and I'm like, oh, it's a little threat here and there. Look at what they endured, like I can do this.
Well, we want to keep you safe. But turning back to your work for a minute, I was struck by what you said when we were just chatting earlier, because so much of the embroidery and some of your earlier work came from rappers like Biggie and Tupac, and one of these big kind of wake-up call moments for you that anti-Semitism was real and really scary, related to a rapper that you had, been singing along to as a young girl. Could you tell us a little bit about that experience? And also about how these male voices ended up reclaimed in your work.
Yeah, that's great putting that together, Coco. Okay, so like growing up in East London, 80s and 90s, like it was hip hop. Hip hop was the culture. Obviously, that is a male-dominated genre of music, especially then. And sexual violence was not something that was frowned upon. So there was like openly lots of that messaging, and I loved it. Like I loved that music, and I still do. I'm able to look at it now from a place of like that thing of where you're like, can you appreciate the art and also be like, well, I don't check for that, I don't check for that, but I also understand the context of the time and the place that art was made, right? In the UK, there was also, I don't know if anyone listens to garage music, but I grew up listening to garage music and grime as well, which was like the British version of hip hop. And there was this one artist called Wiley who was in this crew called So Solid Crew, and he was actually sleeping with a girlfriend of mine at school. Yeah, and Wiley was like amazing. And then in the pandemic, he decided to wake up and go on a complete anti-Semitic rant. I think on his Twitter. No, I think it was Instagram actually. And so everyone that I knew in London was talking about and responding to that. And at the time, actually, there was this little sweet spot where I could say, this is really fucked. And the response would be like, shit, that's really fucked. I don't feel that is the response. That's not the knee-jerk response from a lot of people that I know and grew up with and have been in community with. But there was that little moment during the pandemic where I feel that anti-Semitism, although not a lot of people were speaking about it, when you did, it was taken seriously. That really opened my eyes to, I started to look, I wanted to understand more how someone would feel empowered to do this, and so brazenly say these things. And so then I started to look at hate crimes and things that I've spoken with some of the students this evening about experiences in, like, even just Philadelphia, right, or New Jersey, and there's just it's just up the road, and the anti-Semitic violence that has been mounting in so much of America it blew my mind open.
Turning back to your work for a little bit, I was listening to you on Mom Carrie's podcast, which everyone should go listen to. It's a great podcast, and you can listen to Zoe for another hour. No, you should do it. You were talking about how your conception of the female body within your work has changed recently, and it's kind of gone from implicit to explicit. I think that's a really beautiful thing. How did that come about, and where are you now with depicting the female body?
Yeah. So like this show that was at Fort Gantor, there were those ceramic works and text pieces, and then also sculptural works. I was making that work off the heels of a violent and very toxic 2-year relationship that I had the misfortune of being in whilst my mother was terminally ill. It was not a fun time. No, thank you. And so I was looking at the home, and I was looking at, as I actually have, I think, from day one, the inevitability of these forms and what it is to be in the kind of more vulnerable form, and the limitations of being a woman physically, but also what comes along with that. So I had never depicted an actual female form. I didn't feel that in the context of art history that I could do that in a way that wasn't objectifying women. I was like, there's enough of us, we're inundated with how sexually objectified the form is. I don't want to contribute to that. And then it was the pandemic, and I'm sorry if you've heard this before, but I was completely alone, and I was living in Dumbo, and me and one of us were talking about how Dumbo, it was like a wasteland, like everyone left. And so I was like, okay, this sucks. I had my child every other week, and then my kid would go to their dad's, and I would just be on my own banging pots and pans at 7 p.m. out the windows to no one. It would just ricochet throughout Dumbo. And I didn't even have my cats then, right? So I was so very alone, and I think like a lot of us probably did. I just scrolled through my phone at pictures, and I was like, oh my god, remember dancing? Oh my god, remember laughing? Oh my god, remember eating together? And I really missed my girlfriends. I missed my women, and I was thinking about how incredible they are and how they're all survivors of different things, whether it's rape or racism or abortions, miscarriage, we've all survived something.
And you described your friends all as forces, but you are not only a courageous person, but a really courageous artist, in that you've used all these different mediums, and I think a lot of times artists feel pigeonholed into one medium, and you've done embroidery and ceramic and neon, and now have turned to film. How do you continue spanning across so many practices? And also, we have so many students in the room. What would your advice be to students who feel scared to step outside of their comfort zone?
Yeah, it's hard, and I think that there's this kind of idea, or there's this falsehood that like everything that we make has to be shown, and it's just simply not true. Like I've made many shit pieces that I put in a drawer, and maybe I'll cannibalize them at some point. Maybe they will die, and they're supposed to die. But I paid someone to be my tutor, and I would sit with him, and we figured out kind of what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it that way. And then I did it. And similarly with the video work, I got a producer, and the producer was like, you need a director of photography and all this shit. I was like, I guess I do. I guess I need this stuff. I don't know. I'm not doing it. So yeah, I think there's that, to be always someone who's learning and to be okay with that. There's not being a perfectionist. You can't be a perfectionist. Yeah, don't be a perfectionist. Keep learning. And then intuition. Everyone has it. And so, connecting to that
And in a lot of your art, there's also the written word, which is like a deeply sacred thing that is not only used through religion, but has been used, in everything. And Anais Nin told Judy Chicago one of my favorite things, which is she said, you have to write about work for men to understand it and for the art world to understand it. You have to be explicit about it. Can you tell us a little bit about how writing works in tandem with your work and what the process is like?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the quote as well, thank you. My mum was a writer and she was also the head of acting at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art at Rama. And so my household was full of actors, which was a problem because I think that's what made me start thinking that I should date actors, huge mistake. I told my mum before she passed, I was like, Mum, you fucked me up with that. She was like, oh gosh, I think I did. Shit. But I was constantly around literature, and she was a Shakespeare expert. She loved it. She would smoke a split and then start dissecting Shakespeare, and I'd be like, okay. But it was kind of in me. I didn't feel empowered to start putting out my own writing until I was asked to do an essay for the New York Times. And at that point, I decided to do this kind of weaving together mini little kind of poem thing, those snippets of things that either I had said or women had told me about pertaining to bleeding and bruising and things that men, that one dude, had said to me. So anyway, whatever, I wove together this thing and I gave it to the New York Times and they hated it and they said, it makes no sense, it's too abstract, which they had told me I could be as abstract as I want. So I was like, okay, y'all are basic. And I wrote something basic and they printed it, and so then I had the beginning of what has become this longer poem called Show Me Your Bruises Then. And at that point I started to embroider these little bits of text, and no one knew that I had written that until later.
So much of your art is so personal as well as the written word is. How do you protect yourself, and how should we all protect ourselves at such an intense time where you're giving so much but also want to feel safe enough that you're able to produce this beautiful art that feeds so many people?
I think that I need to get better with that, first of all, definitely. So I'm glad you've asked me, because saying these words will help me to live this. I think that we need to be okay with stopping. I was on the train for, 3 hours? And I'm on a deadline for a commission, so I was embroidering the whole time and I fucking hate it. And I missed the view. I glanced and I saw the view a couple of times, but when I got off the train, I was like, you've just missed out on life. You've missed out on life for money, actually. That's not healthy, that's not what I want. And so I am trying to get that balance. I miss staring into space, I miss staring out of a window, I miss being bored. I haven't been bored in a long time. I think being bored is so awesome. I want to be lazy. I want these experiences. I did just get back from Jamaica, so I can't complain. I just went on vacation for 5 days, so let me not complain. But I think we need to, however, you need to protect yourself and your space. And then again, it's that thing of you probably know what you need to protect yourself. It's just, we do know, it's just that often we just don't do it.
That's very true. Is there a work, we started with Champ, which is this huge uterus that you've declared is not your proudest piece, that is overlooking all of Sunset Boulevard. Could you give us all a look into what you feel like is your proudest piece in this moment?
That's my niece. Not that, that's me. It's interesting that you asked me that with the picture of my niece, because I did that for my last New York solo show, which was called Tended, and I was looking for the first time, I was actually looking at softer moments between women. So that's my sister-in-law doing my niece's hair, and actually, the Whitney wanted that piece, and I was like, no. I said no, it's not for sale. It's not for sale. I'm keeping it within the family, and it's not that it's like, it's not that it's my proudest piece because I don't think I could say, I don't think I could pick one. I guess I do love my work.
It's like favorite children.
Yeah, exactly. And that is my child. But the reason why I wanted to keep it in the family is because I was aware that this is the first time that I'm depicting a young black child, and that's my relative, and she's my family, and everyone wanted to buy it. Everyone, that was the piece that, like, the gallery approached me multiple times, like, saying, are you sure? Because and I'm like, I don't feel comfortable selling for profit this little girl in this moment, because I think there can be in art there is, with certain collectors, a sort of fetishizing. And I can't have my niece be a part of that. So I kept it for myself for now. Yeah.
So protective.
I'll give it to her eventually if she's lucky.
I hope she gets it. Oh my gosh, play her back this video. I'll send it to her.
She's awesome.
As we're wrapping up, I wanted to share a quote that comes up for me so much when I look at your work and just kind of hear what it brings up for you, which is by Marilyn Minter, who is a major hero of, I guess, both of ours, and a brilliant activist and artist who said, art should be a reflection of the times we live in, it should challenge and provoke, and I think your work does exactly that. Do you want to share a little bit about what that quote means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, by the way, and I love Marilyn, and we love her. She's so fucking brutally honest as well. I saw her at a screening, and it was, I guess it's like the 20 or 25th year anniversary of the film Sophie's Choice, and so we're all feeling a bit fucking vulnerable because it was this year, and this movie was, about the Holocaust, and there was like a little afters thing, chic, and I was there with Laurie Simmons and Marilyn Minter, and she just goes, that movie does not hold up. And I was like, damn it. And she was like, it's too long. But anyway, getting to the question, I feel for me that activism has always been a part of everything that I've made, but it's not always been overt. And so my little bits of like commentary are sometimes or often, like Marilyn when she has her solo shows, and you think about her portraits, but then you think about like the stuff she does with Planned Parenthood and slogans and condoms and stuff like that, right? And it's like they're the same artist, but she's saying to you, I've spent 2 years on this, and I haven't spent 2 years on that, and I want it to be more like widely sort of, circulated. Thank you. So I feel like I've been given this great opportunity, I've been given these opportunities over and over again to go really, really like laser into a particular series, which always is something that I deem to be, there is always like activism in it, right? But then I've been approached, like for example, by For Freedoms who do those billboards, and they've said to me multiple times, thanks to Hank Willis Thomas, who we love, can you do a billboard? You have a week, and then I have to access a completely different part of my creativity and just think like, let me think of something that I really feel like is a burning thing that I want to say right now. When a car is driving past it, it has to like grab you. And so I've been able to have those opportunities to kind of like work in two different ways. But I think ultimately, like, what are we doing as artists if we're not provoking thought, if we're not challenging, if we're not drawing people in? Like, we all know, and you know as an art historian, like, there's enough sunsets, there's enough breastfeeding mothers, and those are all there's enough depictions of cherubs, and those are all really, really, really important, and were like groundbreaking and thought-provoking and boundary-pushing at the time, but they exist, and so now we have to do something else about now. That's how I feel.
That's brilliant. I just want to thank you so much. I know everyone has places to be. GCB Wednesdays, really important plans, everyone thought.
Yeah, what's that about?
It's a ball. Where can everyone keep track of you and keep looking at your work and your words and just you? Where can everyone keep tabs on you?
Thank you. Well, I have a website. My name's Buckman, but I don't update it very often. I'm on Instagram if any of you guys are on that hateful app. Find me there, but then also my DMs are full of horrible. So say something nice, and I hope to see it, because I do look in that hidden folder, which just sometimes I'm like, wolf. So that, and then I've got some work and some group shows and stuff. My next solo show is actually not going to be until winter 2025, which sounds like so far in the future, but it's just next year. And that will be at a gallery in Miami called Mindy Solomon, and that will be up during Miami Art Basel. So, and you guys should come because you should see it. Everyone says Miami Art Basel's gross. It's fun. It's fun. As long as you don't mind tacky. I love tacky. So, if you're up for that, I think it's great. So come out for that.
Thank you all for coming, and I just once again want to thank Molly and everyone at Hillel who have so championed this event and me in a way that I didn't even know I deserved or needed, and I'm just very grateful. And thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, Zoe.